What's up, everybody? It's Pikel with League of Items, and today we're going to discuss the NBA. Basketball is back, and they have a bubble, so they are much less at risk than the MLB, which is currently circling the drain. Very sad, but the Yankees had one of their games canceled tonight, and once you start canceling Yankee games, you might as well turn off the entire season. But that's neither here nor there. Today, if you are an observant person, you'll realize there is another face in this video. This is Chris. So Chris, explain everyone why you're here, and then we'll get straight into the teams, because we don't have much time to waste.
All right. Yep. I'm Chris, as Mike mentioned. I'm here to talk some basketball. I don't have nearly the same daily fantasy experience as Mike does, but I'm a big numbers guy. Been a basketball fan for 15 years. I consider myself a pretty knowledgeable on most subjects NBA, and I'm excited to learn some more stuff about the sort of daily fantasy sports world and look at the league through that lens. So what do you say we get into it with the Boston Celtics, Mike?
Let's not do the Boston Celtics. Let's do the Washington Wizards. We're gonna go 9-1.
Sure.
We're gonna go 9-1. We talked about this pre-show, Chris. That's strike number one. Two more strikes, and we'll think of something. Maybe you'll get kicked off the show. Who knows? So let's start with.
And we'll cancel the baseball season.
Honestly, I would much rather have the baseball season canceled because of your mistakes than the NBA season. So I agree. That's a good idea. Okay, so we're each gonna have a minute to talk about this, but we screwed up the intro, so I'm gonna fix it right now. This is gonna be called bALL-IN. This was Chris's wife's idea to call it bALL-IN. So Molly, you get all the credit. It's a good idea to call it bALL-IN because, well, Chris, you explain.
All right, so you got the ball-in, which in a typical pickup game, if you're if you're trying to sort of like get in someone's face, you're fouling a little hard, but they're not calling it because it's a pickup game. When you get up off the court and you walk back over, and you're like ball in.
Yeah, exactly.
But also
very tough.
there's
Very
there's
tough.
there's the all-in aspect because we are talking about gambling. So
Two levels deep.
as my much smarter than me wife thought of, ball in. So.
And then third, we fly high, no lie.
Oh yeah, bowling.
There you go. All right.
Yes.
So this segment, we're gonna do beat the clock or buzzer beater. You guys can vote on which one you think is better in the comments. But basically, Chris and I will have 1 minute to talk about each team. When we start doing like breakdowns for slates, we might go a little bit longer. But for now, we're doing 1 minute, 1 minute each, and then we'll kind of discuss a little longer, and then we'll just move teams. So I'm gonna go first. We have the Washington Wizards, and the 1 minute starts now. So the Washington Wizards are in 9th place currently in the NBA. They are not a very good basketball team in real life. They're going to lose a lot of games. But the Washington Wizards are great for DraftKings scoring because they generally play small lineups, shoot a lot of threes, and have good over-unders. So for the most part, Washington Wizards players will be not highly owned, but they're always a good team to look for value options. So if we go through their roster real quick, one of the first names that I look at is Ish Smith because Ish Smith was a good sixth man when he was on the Sixers. I would probably expect him to be around the 5K mark when we get into most games. But the players that I'm looking at specifically going into this are Isaac Bonga, Thomas Bryant, Jerry Grant, Rui Hachimura, Shabazz Napier should get some good minutes, and Ish Smith. Those are really the main players. Mo Wagner has had some great games as well. But outside of that, I'm going to have to see what these players do and see what their rotations look like before I feel comfortable playing them. And that's 1 minute. So that goes by real fast. So good luck. Good luck, Chris. Good luck. I'm resetting the alarm now. Are you ready to go?
Oh, I'm ready to go.
All right. So your time starts now.
All right, rather than going the full wide berth, sort of naming a bunch of names, I'm going to take my minute to focus on one guy in particular that I think could see a lot of time, especially with Bradley Beal not being a part of this whole bubble situation because he was just kind of like, I've done enough this year. And that is Shabazz Napier. I know it's a small sample size, but his last two games before everything shut down, it was back in March against the Heat and the Knicks. Across those two games, he averaged 24 points a game, 3 rebounds, 6.5 assists, and 3.5 steals a game. So if you can get him at a reasonable price, and he's just sort of like, look, we're in 9th place, we got nothing to lose, starts chucking up shots. He's a bulldog on defense at times, as evidenced by those 7 steals in his last 2 games. I think he's a guy who could really give you some, some 7x, some 10x love there and really pay off in a tight spot.
Wow, with time to spare. With time to spare.
Well, I was gonna keep going.
It was like 5 seconds.
Okay.
It was 5 seconds. The alarm's gonna go off now. So yeah, I mean, you're allowed to use your minute however you want. I think that the Shabazz Napier is a pretty good call. My concern would be like how often do they run Ish Smith with him on the court at the same time? And I mean, if the Wizards aren't really playing for much, I could see them both playing a decent amount. But then you also have Jerry and Grant, Troy Brown Jr. So I don't know what the rotation is going to look like, obviously. Rui Hachimura is okay with the ball in his hands. Isaac Bonga is okay with the ball in his hands. In the beginning of the season, he was listed as like a point guard and a small forward. But yeah, I think that was pretty good for the first one overall. Mo Wagner is also a pretty good like Joakim Noah style big man, where he can be at the top of the post and kind of distribute a little bit. So he'll be interesting as well. Who's up next? Next up, we're doing the Orlando Magic. That's how you say that, right?
Yes. Yeah, I think so.
All right. So apparently, when I was starting up the timers before, I opened up like seven tabs with timers. So I'm fixing that right now. Do you want to go first on the Magic?
Yeah.
All right. Your time starts now.
All right, with the Orlando Magic, a couple of names I'd like to focus on. Aaron Gordon. I love the way that guy fills a stat sheet. I haven't seen, like, I feel like he's right up there with a guy like, his name's escaping me, the guy on the Bulls, Zach LaVine on the Bulls, where they can lose by 20 and he could still have a game where he's just doing everything. He's blocking the ball, he's making the highlight plays, he's, sniffing around a double-double at times. I like him a lot. I like what I've seen from Markelle Fultz, although I don't know, with a lot of these guys, you're going to hear this a lot, it's going to come down to pricing. But as they grow to trust him more, the Magic, I feel like they know that they're not going to do a ton this year. So he's a guy they took a flyer on. If they want to just sort of throw some more minutes his way, keep the ball in his hands a little bit. And it feels like throughout the season, as he's built a little bit of confidence, as he's unbroken his shot, he's found some opportunities there. I don't really see there being many other issues on the roster. Michael Carter-Williams isn't stealing minutes from anyone. DJ Augustine is probably 65 years old at this point, not to be ageist. But yeah, I like what I've been seeing from Markelle Fultz, and I feel like
that's the time
on nights where he puts it all together.
So you ended off talking about Markelle Fultz. Not the worst person to talk about on the Magic. But my minute is starting now. Okay, so for the Orlando Magic, everything is centered on Nikola Vucevic. Very good player. In one of the restart scrimmages, he was shooting the ball from all over the court. Like, I think he is actually turning into not a true stretch five, but he does have a 3-point shot now. I don't want him shooting threes, but he can do it technically, so they have to respect it. I think when you're looking at Orlando Magic, you need to consider Evan Fournier, Aaron Gordon, Jonathan Isaac, and Nikola Vucevic as the 4 primary targets on this team. So when you're looking at salaries, you really need to figure out where you stand on those players before you start going to secondary options. DJ Augustine will probably still be the starter, but actually I don't know if you're starting at the end of things. But DJ Augustine is going to be competing with Markelle Fultz for minutes, even though maybe he shouldn't. Maybe they should take this as an opportunity to kind of let Fultz run the show. But if they want to stay in the playoff race, they'll probably need to use both more than you want. And that's all the time that I get for that. So is there anything else you wanted to say about the Magic?
Not at the moment. Evan Fournier is another guy, one of those like stat sheet fillers that I like, where he does a little bit of everything. So I definitely keep an eye on him. But aside from that, I think salient points, Michael.
Yeah. See, the one thing I would say about Fournier is like he's definitely a score first player. Like I think there are games where he just completely disappears in the secondary stats. But you can almost always count on him to get like 15 to 20 points in a game. What's his average? Do you have it in front of you? Well, while you get that, I'll start talking about the next team we're going over, which are the Brooklyn Nets.
He averaged 18.8 points, 3.2 assists, 2.5 rebounds, and a steal per game before everything shut down.
Yeah. So the way that I would look at that is his assists probably come from set plays, not where he's actually being a creator, but where like he just luck boxes into an assist. And then rebounds, probably the same thing. I think Aaron Gordon, Jonathan Isaac, Vucevic, I'm probably going to say that name like 5 different ways, but I feel like I'm saying it pretty close no matter what. So that doesn't really matter. But the Brooklyn Nets are currently in 7th place. By the end of the restart, if they manage to hold on to a playoff position, I think everyone would be shocked because their roster is atrocious. So do you want to go first or second for this one?
Let's keep alternating. I like that. Let's you can take the lead on the Brooklyn Nets.
All right. So the Brooklyn Nets. Before maybe this is a good idea. Before I start the timer, I'm going to go through the roster just so we're on even footing going into the 1 minute. So we have Jarrett Allen, Justin Anderson, Chris Chiozza, Jamal Crawford, Dante Hall, Joe Harris, Tyler Johnson, Rodions Kuruc. I'm pretty sure that's how you say that. Karis LeVert. Big fan of Karis LeVert. TLC himself. Jeremiah Martin. Janan Musa, Garrett Temple, and Lance Thomas. Everyone's favorite Nick. So let's go to the minute now. I think I know where I'm going on this one, and the time is starting now. So, like I said, the most important player on the Brooklyn Nets is Karis LeVert. Karis LeVert is a player I've been huge on since he came into the league from Michigan. He just looked like the kind of player who would be a good starting 2 or 3 for a long time. He's not the most athletic player in the NBA, but he does everything pretty well. He will have the ball in his hands not running the offense, like being a real creator like a Ricky Rubio kind of player, but he is good enough ball handling and passing to justify a high usage rate. Other players that I'm curious to see what happens is Jarrett Allen. Jarrett Allen's a player that I like to target bigs against because you can have games where Jarrett Allen goes for 20-20 and somebody else on the other team goes for 20-20 just because you need to have a length. You need to have the length from your 5 if you're going up against Jarrett Allen, but he's also kind of not the best at stopping the player he's supposed to stop. He's more like, I'm going to go block that guy over there when he's driving the lane, and then it's like an easy dump-off pass. Also, Lance Thomas is a saint. But that's all I've got for the 1 minute. So the alarm is now going off. I stopped the alarm. I reset the timer. And are you ready?
Yeah, I'm ready to go.
Right, your minute starts now.
All right. Someone I'm going to focus on with my minute is a guy by the name of Garrett Temple, who might have only been scoring 10.3 points per game, but if you look at the top of their stat sheet, you got Kyrie Irving not coming back at 27 points a game. You got Spencer Dinwiddie at 20.6 points a game. He's not going to be in the bubble. Mm-hmm. So those shots are going to have to go somewhere. So, I mean, I'm not seeing really many other places that they can go. You know, I know you love LeVert, but he can only take so many shots. He was already averaging 16 field goal attempts a game. So, I mean, they're not jacking up to 25. Get around a little bit. And just with a lot of guard play opening up, I like Garrett Temple sliding in there for a little piece. And also, I know that you think that the Nets won't make the playoffs, but right now, as things stand, they are 6 games clear of the Washington Wizards, who also didn't bring Bradley Beal back to this whole thing. Mm-hmm. So I don't see them falling out of the playoffs. I mean, I do see them losing in the first round to either the Bucks or the Raptors by 30 points a game. But yeah, it looks like whether Michael likes it or not, those Brooklyn Nets are gonna back their way in.
Very true. I did not take that into consideration. So I think you're definitely correct there. You froze a little in the middle, but I don't think we actually missed anything that you said because it kind of just picked up. So okay. The one thing for the Brooklyn Nets, I think that we would be kind of doing everybody a disservice if we didn't talk a little bit more about Joe Harris, very good 3-point shooter. There were some questions, I think, whether or not he was coming back, or at least I saw his name on Twitter recently. I'm not sure what the deal is with him. Tyler Johnson, he could take a lot of minutes, and he did have stretches where he was very impactful on the Heat. So if Tyler Johnson steps into more minutes, I think he has a chance to actually be something. Kuruc, he played well at the end of last season, I believe. Or it was either the end of last season or the beginning of this season, and I can't tell the difference because coronavirus has completely changed my perception of time. But he is somebody that I think if he steps into more minutes and more usage could be interesting. Garrett Temple, I agree, he is kind of interesting, but I wouldn't be surprised if they kept him, if they limited his touches. Because if you're the Nets, you're not doing anything this season. You might as well develop the young guys. And apparently, Timothé Luwawu-Cabarrot has gotten a lot of extra touches and has a higher usage rate. And that's kind of by intention, by design. I think that the Brooklyn Nets' new coach is intentionally doing that. So that's somebody I'd watch out for as well. But let's go to
All right,
the
that's a fair
let's
point.
go to the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 Sixers, 10, 9, 8, 76ers. Do you know that song or no?
All right. No, I've got no idea what you're talking about.
So Danny went to UDEL, and there are a lot of Sixers fans that go to UDEL, and apparently there is a like theme song for the Sixers, and that's how the song goes. Is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 Sixers, 10, 9, 8, 76ers, and it's just like, it's just insane. You got to listen to that song. It's an amazing song. It's very good. But we are on the Sixers, so you're up first, right? Or actually, do you want to say the names first?
Yes, I am. Let me just say my name first.
No. I'll go through the names first, and then I'll start the clock. Okay? So, for the Sixers, we have Alec Burks, interesting player, formerly on the Jazz. Joel Embiid, the process himself. The process incarnate, you might say. Tobias Harris, Al Horford, Furkan Korkmaz, that's not a typo. Shake Milton, Raul Neto, Kyle O'Quinn, gotta love Kyle O'Quinn. Norvel Pell, or Pelly, not sure how you say that. Josh Richardson, Glenn Robinson III, Mike Scott, Mariel Shiok, I don't know if I did that one right, Ben Simmons, and Matisse Thybulle, a player that Chris and I we were actually talking about that player going into the draft, and I said, that guy, he's going to be pretty good.
Yeah, actually, there was a video of him today. Just they called it just flat out bullying Dennis Schroeder, where I think at one point he was playing defense on him, poked a steal out, went down, took it the other way, made an easy layup over the guy who was like 8 inches shorter than him, and then on the immediate next possession, just like snuck him out of nowhere and was like, boop, block, and just made Dennis Schroeder more of a joke than he was when he was a rookie on the Hawks, kicking guys in the nads.
Yeah. So Thybulle, he went to like Washington or something like that in college.
Yep.
Extremely athletic, a great defender. Not sure if he's going to be very relevant for fantasy outside of like secondary stats and a random couple of shots a game. But he's somebody to keep an eye on, I guess. So you're up first, and your minute starts now.
Right. Someone that I'm interested, because like I said, I don't have a ton of experience with the daily fantasy sports, but a player that I've been high on all like 5 or 15 of the teams he's been on at this point is Tobias Harris. I like the way he plays the game. I gets involved a lot. Reasonable clip. Actually, outside of Joel Embiid, he was the leading scorer on the Sixers on a per-game basis this year. So, like I said, I'm at anyone at the right price, I think could work out well. But aside from that, the Sixers seem like they're healthy. So you got to give Joel Embiid a little love. And this is a team where I probably would focus on the stars a little more, just because they're right in the middle of that whole pack. So I think that they're going to try to use these 8 games to try to position themselves into a spot where they might try to move up a little bit. So Ben Simmons, he's a guy that I don't like how often he just doesn't show up. And it's like, oh, I'm just playing defense today. And the fact that he can't shoot a 3. So I would think that he could be priced a little high on a name basis and not really produce often.
The alarm has gone off.
Those are 2 guys definitely giving a little bit of love towards Tobias Harris. Oh, okay.
So the alarm has gone off. You did break up a little bit there. I will ask you now. Are you on the Wi-Fi or are you on the 5G? So just you take a look at that. And I will do my minute on the Philadelphia 76ers. And my time is going to start right now. So I do agree with Chris. I think that you do need to take the primary players into consideration first. Joel Embiid, Ben Simmons, Josh Richardson, Ben Simmons, Josh Richardson, Tobias Harris, Joel Embiid. Those 4 players are going to make up most of the fantasy production from this team. You will have other players coming in randomly in blowouts, and when that happens, I think someone like Kyle O'Quinn is going to be the biggest beneficiary. He, in games that are blowouts, his like fantasy points per minute is out of control. He can go in and get 10 points and 10 rebounds in about 10 minutes. So that's always someone you need to kind of keep in the back of your mind. Al Horford is someone who has not played a lot with Joel Embiid. They haven't figured out a way to make them work together in recent history, and that's actually one of the main things I pulled off of Twitter, was that they're not working well together, so I'm not sure how much time they'll actually see the floor together. And my minute is done. Was there anything else you wanted to say about the Sixers?
Yeah, yeah. I noticed that you had conspicuously left out Al Horford, and I was thinking anything I've heard from that team was they were a lot more inefficient with him on the floor. I actually heard they had talks about trying to dump him after just signing him this past offseason. They were trying to dump him during the trade deadline. There was some speculation of an Al Horford um, for possibly, but it's clear that he's not the gel insole that makes that shoe comfortable. You know.
Yeah, and it was interesting. I thought it was an interesting pickup when they made that. It was a trade, right? Or did they just sign him in the offseason?
No, they signed him. Yeah, he was a free agent. He opted out of his last year in Boston.
Yeah, so it kind of makes sense because Al Horford can be like a point center kind of player or a point forward if you want to consider him a four next to Joel Embiid. They had like an extremely long team, which could be very good for defense. But yeah, Joel Embiid can handle the ball. Ben Simmons can handle the ball. Josh Richardson can handle the ball. Tobias Harris can handle the ball. You don't need Al Horford. Like a more athletic version of Al Horford or like a younger Al Horford. Now we're talking. But current Al Horford, I don't think he's really the best use of court time right now. But who knows? Maybe they figure it out, or maybe he becomes very good with the second unit. But next up we have the Indiana Pacers. Do we know if Victor Oladipo is coming back? Is he playing?
Yeah. So he was originally projected not to come back. He said he was going to take the rest of the time just to keep rehabbing the injury that he had. And then he actually reconsidered a couple of days later. He's been crushing it in the scrimmages they've had, and just a little side note. I believe Domantas Sabonis, first time All-Star this year, bubble to get treatment for a foot injury, and there's I think pretty strong speculation that he might not play at all.
Yeah. So Sabonis has plantar fasciitis, supposedly, and they're considering season-ending surgery like now. So that's bad. So keep that in the back of your mind while we talk about
not ideal.
The rest of the players. I'll run through the roster right now, and then I'll start my minute first. So we have Goga Bitadze. He's like a big man. Doesn't get a lot of minutes, but maybe with Sabonis out he does. Brian Bowen II. Is that Bruce Bowen's kid? I don't know. Malcolm Brogdon, very good player. Aaron Holiday.
How could he be the second then?
Good, exactly. That's what I was thinking. Aaron Holiday, good player. Very young as well. Justin Holiday, he spent a little bit of time on the Knicks, so I obviously have a lot of love for him and respect for leaving. Alize Johnson, I think he's more of a 3 or a 4. Did he play at West Virginia or Marquette? Some kind of team like that, I think. Not positive. Don't quote me on that. Jeremy Lamb, UConn's own. That was a lot of fun when he made the run with Kemba and Shabazz, right? He was on both of those teams. TJ Leaf from UCLA,
I think so.
TJ McConnell, Doug McDermott, Naz Mitchell-Long. Is he a first-year, second-year player, right? I don't think he plays very much.
I think so.
Victor Oladipo, obviously a very good player. Maybe his minutes actually get to a decent level, but who knows what it's going to be like in the beginning. Sabonis might be out for an extended period of time. Jakar Sampson, Edmund Sumner, Miles Turner, and T.J. Warren. So they have 3 TJs on their team. That's absolutely ridiculous. They need to cut at least one of those guys to make it simpler for us. So I'll start my minute now. And the clock is moving. So Malcolm Brogdon, very good player. He will control the ball a lot, and he is a stat sheet stuffer. So he's good for fantasy. He can go between like 7,000 to 8,000 on DraftKings normally, I think is where he normally is priced at. So there is a good chance that on these slates you'll be trying to include him in your player pool, but he doesn't really have like this slate breaking upside, so you have to be careful with him. Aaron Holiday is a very young player that has a lot of upside. He might be like, he's probably someone who would be the biggest beneficiary of Victor Oladipo shutting it down at some point during the restart. Miles Turner, he's an okay big man. He was really overrated in the beginning of his career, but I think that a lot of the talk around their camp right now is that he's actually playing really well and is kind of finding where he fits within the offense. So I wouldn't be surprised if Miles Turner has some really good games, but I'm not overly excited by him. That is my minute. Let me reset, and you're good to go.
All right. Yeah, actually, somebody that I was planning on mentioning was Miles Turner, because with the absence of Domantas Sabonis, you do lose 12.4 rebounds per game.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that even in earlier opportunities in his career, Turner wasn't the biggest rebounder. I think his career high caps out at like 7.2 rebounds per game. But still, I mean, someone's going to have to be on the floor. And while, it's funny that you said, oh, he was really overrated early in his career, my plan was to lead with me saying, yeah, he's a guy on a couple of years ago. So that's you subtly calling me an idiot.
That's not what I said.
But, I should come to expect that. Yeah, he also, you kept referring to Aaron Holiday as very young. He is 23, so the guy's been drinking for a couple of years now.
Really? Wow. Okay.
Yeah, like you said, Malcolm Brogdon is. Yeah, I mean, he was very young, but now he's not as young. I guess that's the way time works in a linear fashion. Um, yeah, Malcolm Brogdon, I'm interested to see like how he does, especially if Victor Oladipo doesn't play, because that could make him even more ball dominant. And really, no Sabonis, no Oladipo. It's kind of just going to be Brogdon, Turner, and Warren out there. And obviously, Miles Turner's not going to take the ball a ton. And TJ Warren and his 1.4 assists per game, he's clearly not going to be running the ball through him. So Brogdon, like you said, he's going to be priced probably in the 7,000 to 8,000 range, and it's all going to be dictated based on how much he's playing. But early on, I could see a little bit of sort of wiggle room there and maybe a little upside.
Yeah. Okay, so that's the time. And you're right. I think in the beginning, he'll probably be, or hopefully will be closer to 7,000, depending on what the slate looks like. Because like relative to other players, he might be more likely to hit his 5x, which they would like bump it up a little bit, I think. But I did stop your timer because it was a little off in the beginning. So the last thing I would say is, with Sabonis being gone, TJ Leaf, I think, has gotten a lot of minutes in the past. And then TJ Warren is another player they plan on using at the 4 sometimes. So TJ Leaf and TJ Warren are going to be competing for like starters level of minutes, so like between 20 to 30 minutes, maybe up to 35. I think in that situation, TJ Warren's very interesting because when he was on the Suns, he did have a bunch of games where he put up like 50 fantasy points. So like he can get 20 real life points and 10 rebounds, a couple of assists, like random stuff like that. So TJ Warren, depending on his price, I'll be pretty interested on a bunch of different slates. So next up, we're going to the Miami Heat. I'll go through the roster, and then Chris will go first. So we have Bam Adebayo, Kyle Alexander, Jimmy Butler, Jay Crowder, Goran Dragic, Udonis Haslem, Tyler Herro, Solomon Hill, Andre Iguodala, Derek Jones Jr., Myers Leonard, Kendrick Nunn, KZ Okpala, Kelly Olynyk, Duncan Robinson, Chris Silva, and Gabe Vincent. So let me reset the timer. And are you ready?
Just 1 second.
All right.
Yep, ready to go.
And go.
So with each of these 5 teams that we've worked through thus far, I've been pulling up their stat lines. And something I'm noticing with the Heat is it seems to run their starters a little, and Butler coming in at 34 minutes per game. I'm sure that he's highly priced even without seeing it, but Bam Adebayo, just a guy his size, like them running so much of the game through him, putting up 5.1 assists per game. I mean, he's like younger Nikola Jokic sort of in that way. So just with them focusing, even a guy like Justice Winslow, when he won't be here, getting 32 minutes a game, I think there's some upside there. Kendrick Nunn, I know he was a guy hotter earlier in the year, leads the team in field goals attempted per game. So if he sort of gets lost in the shuffle a little bit and he can get some minutes and get the hot hand going, I could see him having some high-end upside, which you're going to want to fill your rosters out with a little bit. Goran Dragic, he's been a long-term favorite of mine. I feel like he's one of those guys that I'd always wished was a Hawk but never made it there, or at least hasn't yet. So he's a guy that I could see them if they're trying to
still holding out hope.
They don't have a ton of room to move upward. Yeah, right now they're 2.5 games behind the Celtics. I don't really see them catching them during this time. So I can see Miami sort of just trying to stay firm, hold it. So if Dragic gets more minutes because of that, I could see him being the beneficiary. And if we put him in our lineup, so could we.
Yeah. Okay. So now I'll take my minute. And I feel like we'll probably have more to say about the Heat because they're a pretty interesting team. So my minute is starting now. Bam Adebayo, like Chris said, he is I don't know if they really consider it a 5-tool player in the NBA, but he is somebody that can kind of do everything at a very in a very large body. Like he's what 6'11" or 7 feet, or maybe he's like 6'10", 6'11". But he plays like a very athletic 3 or 4. So he's a very interesting player. Jimmy Butler is tenacious. He's going to make sure that everybody in the bubble does not get coronavirus, or at least on his team. Jay Crowder is somebody cut from the same cloth as Jimmy Butler. I think that tandem is very interesting for like for competitive reasons. Like they're going to be pretty tough to play against. I think that they're both somewhat tenacious on defense. Goran Dragic is someone that I've been a big fan of a long time. Tyler Herro has played well this entire year. Kendrick Nunn has played well this entire year, especially in the beginning. And then Duncan Robinson is like one of the best 3-point shooters in the league right now, which is kind of weird to say, but I think by most metrics, I think that's accurate. And Twitter loves him. So that's another player that I would watch out for. A few names that we didn't mention. Kelly Olynyk. I think if any of the big men go down, it will fundamentally change how their team operates, and I think Kelly Olynyk could be a big beneficiary of that because he can kind of run the point forward / center role. And be a stretch 5. So he's always somebody I'm interested in, especially when it's like between 4,000 to 5,000. If he's going to get an uptick in minutes. Myers Leonard, he's been kind of underwhelming as a member of the Heat, right? Like he doesn't play very much, I'm assuming. He's not the same kind. He's more athletic than Kelly Olynyk, but I would rather have Kelly Olynyk on my team than Myers Leonard. Was there anything else you wanted to say about the Heat?
So someone I had forgotten to mention was Jay Crowder. He's a guy that I've always liked. I like the way he plays the game. The only issue with him is I'm not sure if a lot of the stuff he does on the court will always necessarily into on sort of. I was trying to keep an eye on his minutes because he was, albeit in a small sample size of 13 games this year, he was averaging 28.7 minutes per game. So it seems like when he's available, they do like to have him on the court. So he's a guy that to keep an eye on.
Yeah, you are cutting out a little bit, but I think like if you're cutting out and anything becomes like impossible to hear, I'll just recap it a little bit, because I think for the most part everything you said is
okay.
Is it's still coming through. So next up we have the Boston Celtics.
Yeah,
So I'm just going to read the roster for the Boston.
But yeah, through. Go for it.
Jaylen Brown, Carson Edwards, Taco Fall, Javonte Green, Gordon Hayward, Enes Kanter, Romeo Langford, Semi Ojeleye, Vincent Poirier, Marcus Smart, Jason Tatum, Daniel Tice, Kemba Walker, Brad Wanamaker, Tremont Waters, Robert Williams III, and Grant Williams. So what were you saying? I couldn't really hear you.
I was actually saying, it's funny, I was saying that you're breaking up quite a bit during the Heat part. I only heard probably about half what you said.
Okay, so that should come through fine on my recording, but who knows? We will see. So I'm going to start the timer now, and I will go first. Oh, I turned it off. Never mind. Now I'll start. So for the Boston Celtics, Jaylen Brown is a very interesting young player. I think that when he's between 5,000 to 6,000, he's very interesting. When he's up in the 7,000 range, it's a lot more difficult to see the upside for Jaylen Brown because I don't see him scoring 70 points for like tournament winning upside at that level. Gordon Hayward, another player, can kind of do everything, but when you have multiple players on the same team that can do everything, it kind of limits everybody's upside, and it's tough to pinpoint who is going to play well in a specific matchup. So Jaylen Brown, Gordon Hayward, and Jason Tatum are all like good threes in my mind. So like they play the positionless basketball a little bit, which is good for real life basketball, not necessarily a great thing for DraftKings scoring. Kemba Walker always has upside. He can hit 50 points any given night, like actual real life points, like between 40 to 50. So DraftKings, he does have a little bit of upside. And then an interesting player for me is Enes Kanter, similar to Kyle O'Quinn, high fantasy points per minute when given the opportunity. But that is my time. So let me reset the timer. And are you ready to go?
Yep.
Okay. 3, 2, 1, go.
All right. Yeah, something that's interesting that I've watched a lot of Celtics games. I generally, and something that scares me a little bit with the Celtics is I feel like there are so many nights where they just decide, okay, we're kind of just not going in Jaylen Brown's direction tonight, or we're not going to focus that much on Kemba. They've got so much star power, and it's not really an issue I've seen as much with the Sixers, a team that's similarly built in my opinion. But I guess they've had more injury issues, so that sort of dictates your who's playing for you. But like you said, if Jaylen Brown is somewhere around 7,000 or so, I can't see myself feeling comfortable, some sort of intuition or information that's pointing me in that direction. Because I feel like I've seen a lot of games this year where he plays well, the team wins, but he only puts up 15 real life points and then a couple of rebounds, a couple of assists. And a guy like that at 7,000 to me, like, to be totally honest, I feel like I'd feel more if they were similarly priced and I could see Brown being priced higher. I think I like Kemba Walker a lot more because I think he does have more games that he does take over where they run the offense through him. And there's a lot of games where Jaylen Brown contributes to team winning basketball. But like you said, it doesn't always work out in a fantasy sense.
Yeah. Yeah. So you broke up a little bit there, but again, nothing that was difficult to understand. Like you broke up at the right points, luckily. So like you were saying, Kemba Walker, he's normally priced around 7,000 to 8,000 as well. The one thing I would say is that if you're going into a game and you know that the point guard matchup or the wing player matchup is better, you can kind of justify getting more exposure to the Celtics, especially if they're the highest projected team on the slate or something like that. So like if it's Kemba Walker going up against Dennis Schroeder, like I don't know if that's going to happen at all during the restart, but like if something like that happened, you feel better about Kemba being like, I'm going to go ahead and win us this one. You guys can all relax. There are a lot of guards like that are good matchups for fantasy. So next up, we are on the Raptors. The Toronto Raptors. So we have OG Anunoby, Chris Boucher, O'Shea Brissett, that's an interesting combination of names, Terrence Davis, Marc Gasol, DeJuan Hernandez, RHJ, Rondae Hollis Jefferson, Serge Ibaka, Stanley Johnson, Kyle Lowry, Patrick McCaw, Malcolm Miller, Norman Powell, Pascal Siakam, Matt Thomas, Fred VanVleet, and Paul Watson. So you're up first, and you can go now.
Okay. I can honestly say the Raptors are a team that I wish I'd watched more this year, and I'm probably most excited to watch them when we come back. And it's just sort of like they lost Kawhi Leonard, their best player. They're still projected to be the number 2 seed in the East right now. A player in particular that I really like is Serge Ibaka, who feels like he's been around forever, but somehow he's only 30 years old. I like the way he fills the stat sheet. In terms of minutes per game, I think he looks like he's 7th most on the Raptors, but still at a line of 16 block and a couple, most of his minutes right now. I'm interested to see how he's priced. But for in terms of other players on the team, Siakam, I'm sure, with him putting up a borderline MVP type season, I'm sure he's priced highly. So I'm not sure if I can convince myself to go in his direction a lot. But another guy like Norman Powell, who in somewhat limited minutes, who's not necessarily in the top tier of players on the Raptors, seems to do quite a lot with his time as well. Him and Ibaka are definitely guys I want to see where they're priced. I could like them on a lot of nights.
Yeah. So you broke up a little during the Serge Ibaka point. Did you talk about anybody after Serge Ibaka and before? Who was the next player you talked about? It was Ibaka and then
Pascal Siakam.
Yeah. So I think we got most of it. So at one point you were giving the stat line for Serge Ibaka, and I think you're probably saying that he gets a bunch of different kinds of stats and is a good all-around player. Only gets the 7th most minutes on the team, but can do a lot in those minutes. Yeah.
Yeah, that's long and short.
Yeah, so I definitely agree with that. Serge Ibaka has really changed his game a lot since he came into the league on the Thunder. He is kind of an all-around player at this point, but he's a little too oversized to do a lot of the ball handling. But the ball doesn't necessarily go to him to die either. So he will keep the ball moving and be effective on offense. And he also can shoot threes. I don't love watching Serge Ibaka take a three-pointer, but he can do it, and he makes some of them. So now I am up.
Yeah.
Let's start. So Marc Gasol is somebody in the beginning of the season that I rostered several times, and he did absolutely nothing for me. So he's dead to me forever. Pascal Siakam, if he is like 8,000, I'm very interested. If he's like 9,000, 10,000, it's a lot more difficult. I'm not sure what the end of his pre-coronavirus season looked like, but he is a very good player at this point. Stanley Johnson is interesting. He didn't really work out on the Pistons or the Heat, right? He was also on the Heat. But I think that he kind of has upside long term. I don't know if he's really going to put it together in the restart season, though, because they probably won't need to use him very much. Fred VanVleet is someone that I'm always underrating personally. I think that if you can get Fred VanVleet about around the 5,000, 6,000 price point, it's good. But I'm pretty sure he's priced higher than that. I think, especially in the beginning of the season, he went off a few times, so they bumped him up to closer to 7,000, which is kind of scary to roster him at. But that's all we have for Toronto. And last up, we have the Milwaukee Bucks. So for the Milwaukee Bucks, we have Giannis Antetokounmpo, Thanasis Antetokounmpo, Eric Bledsoe, Sterling Brown, Pat Connaughton, Dante DiVincenzo, George Hill, Ersan Ilyasova, one of my favorite players of all time, Kyle Korver, one of your favorite players of all time, I'm sure, because he was a stupid Hawk for a long time, Brooke Lopez, Robin Lopez, Frank Mason, Wesley Matthews, Chris Middleton, Marvin Williams, and DJ Wilson. So I am up first. Let's see. There are several pairs of brothers on this team, or a pair of brothers on this team, I should say. So we have 1 minute on the clock, and I'm ready to go. So Eric Bledsoe is very interesting for DraftKings. He is the kind of player that I will target in like plus matchups, but then I'll also run back the point guard that's playing against him, because he is a very good defender. So, like, he's a very good defender apparently now, which was shocking to me. Like, he was either first or second team all defense last year, and it just doesn't make any sense to me, because I feel like the point guards going against him have a lot of opportunities to put up points. So I don't know if that's just like people using stats to justify Eric Bledsoe being a good defender now, when Giannis probably takes on a lot of the responsibility for locking down the opposing ball handler. But that could just be a limitation of how much I've actually watched the Bucks. He is the most interesting player for me on DraftKings, though, because he does have extremely high upside. Giannis, I mean, I could talk about Giannis, but everybody knows Giannis is just out of control. So you are now on the clock. You're ready, right? Freezing.
Yep.
All right, ready? 3.
All right, so we're
2.
We're talking about
go.
Okay, so the biggest thing that I want to look at with the Bucks is the fact that right now, with only 8 games to play, they're 6.5 games clear of the Toronto Raptors. So honestly, I see them taking a couple of games to make sure Giannis is going, to make sure Middleton's going, and then essentially shutting those guys down, keeping them fresh, because they expect to be going at least to the Eastern Conference Finals, if not, hopefully for them, to the the championship. So I'm looking for secondary kind of guys, maybe a George Hill or a Wesley Matthews, to see an uptick in their minutes. I think they've got a couple of pretty easy games coming up where they play the Magic and the Wizards. So I could see those guys, possibly being in the lower end of the price spectrum and really getting a nice big full minute load, and going from there and possibly giving you some upside to win a little bit. George Hill in particular, I just like the way the guy plays basketball. Gets a couple of rebounds, a couple of assists. He can score some. So I could see him being a guy you roster on a night with him close to 3,000 or 4,000, hopefully, and then just having the upside to possibly score 15 or 20 real points, maybe 7 or 8 real assists, and make it worth your money.
Yeah, George Hill, I think, will often be around 5,000, if I remember correctly. So
I like him less than.
It's borderline, but if he has the kind of night that you're describing and he hits 40 DraftKings points, then it'll be fine. So if you're trying to create a game stack because the Vegas total is really high and you need a little bit of salary savings, maybe you can fit George Hill into a lineup, but that's a little bit more difficult. So that's basically it. We've gone through the 9 teams remaining in the Eastern Conference. We're going to put out another video for the Western Conference, so look out for that. Just keep in mind that we are not positive what the rotations are going to look like or which players are going to survive in the bubble. So it's always important to come back the day before and get the most up-to-date information, which we will hopefully have for you. Chris, you're staring at the camera like a serial killer right now, kind of freaking me out. But that's all we have. That's all we have.
It's funny that you mentioned that because, yeah, I was trying to give a note to my wife, who's trying not to walk through the frame. So I was trying to look normal,
Oh,
and
no.
obviously didn't do that.
No, you did not. That was the opposite of normal looking. But we're finished now, so you can give that note verbally. Thanks for watching, everybody. Please leave your comments and recommendations in the comment section below. Otherwise, look out for those other videos, and we'll talk to you soon.